Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, History of Us. I'm so sorry that there's been such a gap between the videos. Been very busy as of late with schoolwork and my clubs, but I'm super excited for this video. So today we're going to be going over a brief overview of the history of immigration in the United States. And basically we're just going to go up to about the start of the 20th century. So yeah, let's get into it. Immigration has always been an important part of the American story. Almost all the founders of the Jamestown settlement were English immigrants. So the people who started the Revolutionary War were European immigrants. There were many indigenous peoples involved in the Revolutionary War, but they weren't the patriots that we learn about today, the ones who instigated the conflict. They merely chose sides. As Dennis Wetman explains in his book Immigration, very few of these first immigrants were wealthy. In fact, most of them were indentured servants, and not all of them came willingly. Other settlements in the New World, well, the so-called New World, were founded by immigrants from different countries. Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, was an English immigrant. Scots Irish immigrants were big supporters of the Revolution in Pennsylvania. And actually, 4 people who signed the Declaration of Independence were born in Ireland. In addition, after the Revolutionary War, many of the British German troops stayed in the United States. Even some of the founders, many of whom were immigrants themselves, were skeptical of immigration. President Washington did welcome immigrants, but he didn't really want them in the army. And Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were also skeptical of immigration. So the first immigration law in the United States required 2 years of residency to become a citizen. During the French Revolution, there were actually many French aristocrats who were immigrating to the United States. In 1795, the Naturalization Act of 1795 changed the residency requirement to 5 years before someone could become an American citizen. It also required that that person had already said that they wanted to gain naturalized citizenship 2 years before. They had to denounce any other allegiances and any foreign titles. They had to take an oath of loyalty to the United States. And they had to have a court rule that they had good character, believed in the United States Constitution, and could have a positive impact on their community. And it was only applicable to free-born white persons, among whom nationals of countries at war with the United States were barred. So it was very difficult. And then under President John Adams, the Naturalization Act in 1798 changed the residency requirement to 14 years. And in that same year were the Alien Act, which allowed the president to arrest any dangerous immigrant at their own discretion, and the Alien Enemies Act, which said that unnaturalized males, 14 or older, could be removed, but this wasn't really enforced. And these 3 laws ended at the beginning of the 17th century. And then during the War of 1812, there was a flood of people coming to the United States. Because of this increase, there was the Passenger Acts, which were passed to improve conditions of immigrants coming to the United States. And then immigration levels continued to rise throughout the 1800s, and it was mostly Europeans. This was because there were many rebellions in Europe, and then there were rising populations, and the Industrial Revolution, which made many artisans obsolete. In addition, the discovery of gold in California drove much immigration to the United States, especially Chinese immigration. This was partially because of the rebellion in Taiping, and then these Chinese immigrants came and they would work as gold miners, and they were also important in the construction of railroads, and many owned farms. The Scots-Irish immigrants were actually the largest group of non-English immigrants in the 17th century. Although the US was more expensive than British Canada, the Irish preferred it there, and they took jobs such as building canals and railroads that natural-born citizens didn't really want. And then the immigration from Ireland increased with the potato famine in 1845 in the next few years. Unfortunately, the poor working conditions that the Irish had forced them to riot, so this led to them being associated with violence. And then also the Irish Catholics frightened the American Protestants because Americans thought that they would overrun the Protestants, so they faced a lot of discrimination. And then in the mid-17th century, anti-immigrant beliefs increased and became more common. People were worried that immigrants would steal their work because they would work for less money than natural-born Americans would. There was also that religious conflict that I mentioned because many Irish were Catholic and many Americans were Protestant. So the death toll of immigrants coming to the United States was about 9% in the 1940s, and many of them arrived unfit to work. In 1855, the last National Passenger Act established a receiving station for immigrants in Castle Garden. It lasted for 35 years, and then the Native American Party formed. It was formerly called the American Republican Party, and they opposed foreign influence. You may have heard of them before because they were known as the Know Nothing Party. They wanted a 21-year residency requirement, and their party lasted from about 1853 to 1860. It actually included former President Millard Fillmore. In 1855, governors in 6 states and 75 members of Congress were part of this Know Nothing Party. And then in 1856, Fillmore won 22% of the popular vote, running for the Know Nothing Party. So as we go forward in time, in 1864, President Lincoln signed a law to encourage immigration, which restored indentured servitude, allowed for the president to appoint a commissioner of immigration to work with contract laborers, prevented immigrants from serving in the army unless they want to be citizens, and established an immigration office in New York to help process and transport immigrants. Unfortunately, it was repealed after the Civil War in May 1868. So between 1861 and 1870, German immigrants accounted for about 34% of new immigrants, and many of them were skilled craftsmen, bakers, and mechanics. At that time, Irish accounted for about 17% of immigrants from 1861 to 1880, and they lived mostly in cities, and they would work on the Union Pacific Railroad. When they tried to strike for better conditions, unfortunately, they weren't well organized and most were shut down. Irish also worked in very poor conditions, so this terrorist group named the Molly Maguires that originated in Ireland formed an American chapter among miners. Originally, the goal was to help the workers by threatening and committing crimes until change was made, but unfortunately, it eventually changed for the benefit of the leaders of the Molly Maguires. And when many of them were ousted by a detective, they were either hung or imprisoned. So the actions of this group contributed to the stereotype of violent Irish and continued the growing anti-immigrant sentiments in the United States. Then if we go back a little bit, Chinese immigration to the United States mostly started in the 1800s, especially after the gold rush, as I mentioned before. Unfortunately, Chinese immigrants were abused in mining camps, and crimes against them were rarely investigated. So in 1854, People v. Hall, which was a Supreme Court ruling, declared that Chinese could not testify against whites in court. In 1868, the 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship to everyone born in the United States and gave equal rights to all legal residents in the United States. In 1870, the Naturalization Act of that year extended naturalization rights to those of African descent. Unfortunately, it still excluded any other non-white immigrant group, including Chinese. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act occurred, and this was not actually repealed until the Magnuson Act of 1943. It only barred Chinese workers from coming to the United States, so other Chinese could come. In 1882, the Immigration Act of 1882 expanded the ranks of excludable aliens to include other undesirable persons and attributes such as convicts, lunatics, and those likely to become a public charge were excluded also. Now, as time went on, in 1891, there was another Immigration Act, which basically delegated the process of immigration to the government. So, the Superintendent of Immigration, which was actually within the Treasury Department, was in charge of all things immigration, especially in regards to Angel and Ellis Island. Then that next year, the Geary Act renewed the Chinese Exclusion Act and required any Chinese immigrants to verify their legal status by carrying a certificate of residence. In the West Coast, multiple western states, including California and Florida, which wasn't a western state, they made it illegal for those who weren't citizens to own land. Luckily, many Japanese Americans were able to avoid this law because they had children who were born in the United States, so they were citizens. Basically, they just put their land under their name. So that's as far as we're going to go in this video, but I plan to continue this history of immigration up to the present day in the next video. So keep a lookout for that. Then I'm also super excited to announce that my website is almost done, so it should be released hopefully soon. And on there, I encourage you to check out the reading challenges page, which just has some reading challenges that I've been doing and that I would encourage you to do as well if you have an interest in history. And then you're always welcome to give me more suggestions. I still haven't picked my next topic. So there's the Google form, I'll put it in the description of this video, or you can also email me at abby@historyofus@gmail.com. You can also email me with any comments or any other suggestions, or you can comment on this video. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you next time. At the end of this video, you'll see the credits for the sources that I used in this video. So please check those out, and have a great day.